Welcome. Let's get emotional together with this beautiful and inspiring story. It will be impossible not to be moved. The twins are ignored as they fall. Only the maid saves them, not knowing their father is a millionaire. The night on the 40th floor looked like glass, slick, glittering, and one wrong step from disaster. Below, the city glowed like a restless ocean of headlights. Music thumped, champagne hissed, deals were whispered over marble and ego. No one looked at the railing, at the red rubber ball that had rolled too far, too fast. Two small reflections hovered on the edge, breath fogging the pain. Ethan, Noah. A laugh clipped the air. "They're just playing," a bloated investor shrugged. Another loosened his tie, already refilling a flute. The rooftop's wind pressed cold against tiny fingers clinging to glass. The ball rocked once, twice, then vanished into the night. Ethan's sneaker slipped. Noah grabbed him, and both boys pitched outward. Grace Alvarez saw it first, because she was the only one looking down, not up. Blue cleaning uniform, yellow gloves, hair pinned back with a cheap clip. Her mop clattered across the tile as she ran, rubber soles skidding on rain-slick marble. "Hold on, baby! Hold on!" Her voice became the rope they needed. She dropped to her knees, stomach to the floor, arms spearing into the gap. The boys' palms were damp, desperate, impossibly small. Ethan sobbed a single word toward the crowd, "Dad!" and the wind stole it. Grace dug in, forearms burning, ribs grinding the ledge. The city breathed below her, 1,000 feet of nothing. "Breathe with me, in, out. We're doing this together." Alexander Hart turned at the sound that doesn't belong in a victory speech, a child's scream. His slide deck, his investors, his $1 million skyline, all fell away at once. He ran, shouldering past tuxedos and perfumes, knocking a flute from someone's hand. Grace's body was the bridge. His sons were the storm at the end of it. He hit the ground hard, grabbing wrists, one, then the other, then Grace's elbow. Glass shivered. Rain ticked. The world narrowed to 4 hands and a choice. "On 3, Grace rasped, teeth clenched. "You pull, I anchor. 1, 2. They hauled like they were hauling the night back into place. The railing groaned, then surrendered. They tumbled inward in a knot of limbs and breath, and stunned silence. Noah buried his face in Grace's shoulder, hiccuping relief. Ethan clung to her sleeve, like it was stitched to his heartbeat. Alexander's arms closed around all 3, shaking with the aftershock. "Are you hurt?" Grace asked, voice frayed but steady. "They're okay," he answered. But the word broke on the way out. A manager arrived late with a clipboard smile. "Do you need anything?" Grace looked at the boys, not the man. Just water. Her shin was scraped. A thin ribbon of blood slid into her sock. She didn't notice. The only thing that mattered still fit inside her arms. Someone finally cut the music. Shame filled the silence where applause should have been. Alexander saw more than a uniform now. He saw a resolve that didn't blink. In her eyes, smoke, steel, and something steadier than any contract he'd signed. "Thank you," he said, and the words felt too small in his mouth. "I just did what anyone should," Grace replied. They both knew not everyone had. Security murmured protocols, lawyers muttered liability. Alexander signed whatever they shoved at him, never letting go of his son's hands. Grace asked for a bandage and a moment, the kind that changes everything. Noah pressed the red ball into her palm like an oath. She tucked it to her chest. "We're okay now." The elevator mirrored 4 faces on the way down. 2 boys, 1 father, 1 miracle. Street air tasted like wet asphalt and sweet bread from a cart. Alexander opened his mouth, lost the script, found the truth. "Can I reach you tomorrow? For them?" Grace hesitated. A different world, a different wallet, then nodded. "For them." Off camera, the city kept blinking, oblivious. On the roof, wind traced the place where a story almost ended. Inside a pocket, a red ball thumped like a second heartbeat. And somewhere between fear and gratitude, a door unlocked. If you believe miracles don't always make the news, stick around. The afternoon sun was merciless, painting the city in molten gold. Traffic groaned, horns barked, the heat clung like a second skin. Through it all, a black BMW slid into a block where luxury didn't belong. Graffiti-colored walls leaned over sidewalks, voices traded gossip at food carts. Alexander Hart parked between rusted sedans, his reflection fractured in their windows. For weeks, Ethan and Noah had begged the same question at bedtime. "Dad, when is the angel coming back?" Alexander hadn't answered, because he didn't know. His world had always been ledgers, blueprints, deals sealed in penthouses. Now, his son's laughter depended on a woman who scrubbed floors. Inside a cramped agency office, a fan clattered tiredly. Stacks of resumes leaned like exhausted soldiers against the walls. Behind the counter, Mrs. Lopez, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, glanced up. The cut of Alexander's suit, even without a tie, announced another universe. "What can we do for you, Mr. Hart?" she asked, voice careful, curious. "I'm looking for Grace Alvarez," he said, the name both heavy and light. Mrs. Lopez arched an eyebrow, then tilted her chin toward the back. "She's sorting uniforms. Didn't expect her angel to come knocking." Alexander's jaw tightened, but he didn't correct her. Instead, he followed the narrow hall, Hart hammering louder with every step. Grace knelt over a battered box, folding fabric with deliberate patience. Her hair was pinned back, her shirt plain, her sneakers worn thin. The room smelled of detergent and resilience. When she turned, surprise lit her face, followed by guarded caution. "Mr. Hart, are the boys all right?" Her voice trembled with genuine fear. "They're fine," he rushed, then softened. "But they won't stop asking for you." Grace blinked, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over her. "They're good kids. I just did what anyone would have done." Alexander shook his head. "You did what no one else did." The weight of gratitude cracked something inside his polished armor. "I'd like to make you an offer," he said finally. Grace straightened, uncertain. "An offer?" "My sons need you, not a professional stranger. You." The word sounded almost alien leaving his mouth. For a man used to commanding empires, this was a plea. Grace hugged her arms around herself, protective. "I'm not trained. I clean, I don't nanny." "I've hired trained," Alexander countered. "They only cry for you." Silence filled the small room, dense and fragile. Her pride fought her need, her doubt wrestled with the memory of two small hands. Mrs. Lopez peeked in, sensing the shift. "Take it, Mija. Sometimes doors open for a reason." Grace's throat tightened. She nodded slowly, almost against herself. "All right, but only for the boys." Alexander exhaled like a man surfacing from deep water. "Then for the boys," he agreed, though something else stirred behind his eyes. That night in his glass mansion high above the city, silence felt different. The twins finally slept with smiles instead of tears. Alexander stood at their doorframe, watching them breathe evenly. In his study, he lifted a photo of Julia, his late wife. They need her, and maybe so do I. Grace will step into the Hart mansion, where warmth collides with cold wealth, and the boys will remind everyone what family is supposed to feel like. The iron gates creaked open, revealing a world Grace had only glimpsed from a distance. Gardens manicured like paintings stretched on both sides of the driveway. Fountains sparkled under the sun, their spray catching rainbows in the air. The Hart mansion loomed ahead, glass and stone, proud and silent. Grace's sneakers felt too loud against the polished steps. Inside, cool marble swallowed the warmth of the day. Crystal chandeliers threw light across empty hallways. Every corner spoke of wealth, but also of silence. A maid in uniform greeted her stiffly. "Mr. Hart is away, the boys are upstairs." Grace nodded, clutching her small bag as if it might shield her. She climbed the grand staircase, her steps muffled by thick carpet. From behind a door, giggles erupted, pure, unrestrained. Before she could knock, two small bodies crashed into her legs. "Miss Grace!" Ethan shouted, wrapping both arms around her. Noah's eyes filled with relief as he clung to her hand. Grace knelt, her arms wide, catching both boys in a fierce hug. Their warmth undid the chill of the mansion in an instant. "You came," Noah whispered, voice shaking with joy. "I promised I would," she replied, her own throat tight. The marble, for a moment, felt like home beneath her knees. The boys tugged her into their room, bursting with toys and color. There were bunk beds shaped like race cars, shelves stacked with gadgets, but the sheets were rumpled, two pillows pressed together on one bed. "We sleep close," Ethan confessed shyly. "It's the only way we're not scared." Grace's heart clenched at the quiet honesty of grief. She sat with them on the bed, brushing hair from their eyes. "My mother used to say love is stronger than fear," she whispered. The twins leaned in, drinking every word like magic. "Then you'll stay?" Noah asked, desperate hope in his gaze. Grace kissed his forehead softly. "For as long as you need me." That afternoon, laughter filled rooms that hadn't heard it in years. Grace made peanut butter sandwiches, juice in simple cups. The boys devoured them like a feast, grinning through sticky smiles. Later, paper airplanes soared down marble halls, chased by small feet. Servants exchanged surprised glances. Life was sneaking back into the mansion. When Alexander returned that evening, the sound stopped him cold. He followed the laughter to the living room. There was Grace, seated on the couch, a boy on each side. She read aloud from a fairy tale, her voice carrying gentle rhythm. "And the princess discovered she didn't need saving after all," Noah interrupted with a grin. "Like you, Miss Grace, you saved us." Alexander's chest tightened, the weight of the day collapsing. For years the mansion had been a mausoleum, Julia's absence an echo. Now, watching this scene, he felt the impossible. Hope. For the first time in a long while, the house breathed. Later, as Grace tucked the twins in, Alexander lingered by the doorway. The boys fell asleep, clutching her hands, their faces calm. Grace looked up, startled to find him there. "Good night, Mr. Hart," she whispered, careful, almost shy. He answered with silence, but his eyes said everything he couldn't. The mansion will bloom with warmth under Grace's care, but Alexander will struggle with emotions he thought buried forever. Morning broke softer than usual inside the Hart mansion. The kitchen, once a sterile room of chrome and silence, smelled of toast. Grace stood at the counter, hair loosely tied, apron slightly crooked. Ethan and Noah scrambled onto stools, faces smeared with flour. "Let us help!" they shouted, giggling as she handed them spoons. Alexander paused halfway down the stairs, drawn by the noise. He was used to footsteps echoing, not laughter filling space. His polished shoes clicked against marble, a rhythm of authority. But when he reached the kitchen, the rhythm faltered. There they were, his sons laughing freely, Grace at the center. Noah, with powdered sugar on his cheek, waved at him. "Dad, Miss Grace makes the best pancakes ever." Ethan held up a crooked creation like a trophy. Alexander almost corrected them, but his voice caught. Julia's ghost lingered in his memory, but this moment belonged here. Grace caught his gaze, eyes wide with hesitation. "I hope I didn't overstep," she said softly. Alexander cleared his throat, covering emotions with formality. "They look happy," he admitted, the words strange on his tongue. Her smile, small but genuine, was answer enough. After breakfast, the day unfolded like a forgotten dream. Paper airplanes whizzed down corridors of glass and stone. The boys' laughter bounced off portraits of stern ancestors. Grace knelt on the carpet, building castles with blocks. Servants peeked from corners, whispering at the impossible change. In the garden, Grace handed each boy a packet of seeds. "Life grows when we care for it," she explained gently. Ethan shoved dirt with both hands. Noah carefully poured water. Their giggles rose with the scent of wet soil and grass. From the terrace, Alexander watched, arms crossed, face unreadable. For years the mansion had been his fortress and his cage. The rooms were polished but hollow, the silence suffocating. Now every echo was replaced by joy, every shadow by warmth. Grace, with no jewelry, no pedigree, no agenda, carried light. And Alexander felt it burning through the walls he'd built. That evening, the boys begged for a bedtime story. Grace sat between them, a fairy tale book on her lap. Her voice shifted with each character, making them laugh harder. Ethan rested his head against her shoulder, eyelids fluttering shut. Noah whispered, "Don't leave, okay?" before slipping into sleep. Alexander lingered at the door, unseen but undone. The twins slept peacefully, their fears quieted for the first time. Grace kissed their foreheads, pulling the blanket snug. She turned and caught him watching, her breath hitching. "Thank you," he murmured, barely audible, then turned away. Downstairs, Alexander poured a drink but didn't taste it. Julia's framed photo still sat on his desk, her smile eternal. He touched the glass, guilt burning in his chest. But when he closed his eyes, it wasn't Julia's voice he heard. It was Grace's, reading, laughing, promising warmth. Just as the house begins to heal, an uninvited guest, Alexander's sister Victoria, arrives, carrying suspicion and jealousy that threatens everything Grace has built. The echo of heels cracked against marble like a warning shot. Victoria Hart swept into the mansion, perfume sharp, posture regal. Her eyes scanned the hall as if inspecting her own empire. Ethan and Noah ran toward her, voices bright but uncertain. "Aunt Victoria!" they chorused, hugging her legs briefly before retreating. She smiled faintly, but her gaze slid past them. It landed on Grace, who stood quietly near the kitchen doorway. "So," Victoria said, her tone dripping with sugar and steel, "you're the famous babysitter they can't stop talking about." The air stiffened, servants lowering their eyes to the floor. Grace forced a polite smile, hands folded in front. "Yes, ma'am. I'm only here to help the children." Victoria's eyes narrowed, studying her like prey under glass. "That's admirable. But sometimes help turns into something else." Her words sliced subtle, but the message was clear. At dinner that evening, tension spread like smoke. Victoria sat at the opposite head of the long table. Alexander carved steak in silence, jaw tight with restraint. Grace moved quietly, serving plates, trying to disappear into shadows. But the boys pulled her into conversation with innocent joy. "Miss Grace read us a story about a brave princess," Noah exclaimed. "And we planted flowers today," Ethan added proudly. Victoria's fork clinked against porcelain, her smile brittle. "How charming," she murmured, sipping wine with calculated calm. "Amazing how quickly she's become indispensable." Alexander's eyes lifted sharply, locking onto his sisters. "Grace has given them what no one else could. Peace." Victoria tilted her head, lips curving in mock amusement. "Or maybe she's simply very good at playing a role." The twins frowned, sensing the venom hidden in her tone. Later that night, Victoria cornered Alexander in his study. The smell of leather and whiskey clung to the walls. "You can't let her stay here," she insisted, voice hard. Alexander exhaled, rubbing his temple with weary fingers. "You don't get to dictate what's best for my children." Victoria leaned closer, her smile wolfish. "You don't know who she really is. Her bloodline isn't clean." His eyes darkened, but doubt flickered briefly. The mention of the past always clawed at his mind. "You're reaching," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Meanwhile, Grace sat awake in her small upstairs room. She could still feel Victoria's eyes burning holes into her back. The mansion that had begun to feel like home now felt fragile. She whispered a quiet prayer, asking for strength to endure. In her heart, she knew the storm had only begun. The twins, sensing the shift, clung tighter to her the next day. "Don't let her take you away," Ethan begged, eyes wet. Grace hugged them fiercely, hiding her own fear. "No one's taking me from you," she promised softly. But deep inside, doubt gnawed at the edges of her resolve. From a balcony above, Victoria watched the embrace with icy calm. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Enjoy this while it lasts," she whispered to herself. Because for Victoria, family was power, not love, and she had no intention of losing control of either. Victoria will unearth a secret from Grace's past, one tied to her late mother, that will ignite a deeper conflict in the Hart family. Midnight wrapped the Hart mansion in a shroud of stillness. Victoria sat alone in her room, a carved wooden box on her lap. She opened it slowly, as though releasing ghosts long buried. Inside were yellowed letters, brittle photographs, fragments of scandal. One face stared back at her, the face of Elena Alvarez. The resemblance to Grace was undeniable, like time repeating itself. The same dark eyes, the same gentle smile, the same quiet dignity. Victoria's nails dug into the photo, bending it at the edges. "So the maid's daughter dares to live under my roof," she whispered. Her voice dripped with venom, echoing off the expensive wallpaper. Memories of their father rose sharp and raw, laced with cigar smoke. Ernest Hart, once untouchable, had fallen in disgrace. Whispers had spread about a maid who ruined his legacy. Some said she seduced him, others that she accused him falsely. Either way, the Hart name had been dragged through fire. Victoria had spent her life rebuilding the family's image. And now Elena's daughter was tangled with her brother. "To destroy us twice, she wouldn't dare," Victoria growled. But the fury in her chest told her Grace already had. This was war, and bloodlines were weapons. Meanwhile, Grace stirred in her modest room upstairs. Dreams carried her back to childhood kitchens filled with bread and laughter. Her mother's voice lingered, "Protect the innocent, even when it costs you." The dream curdled into chaos. Shouts, accusations, shame. Grace woke trembling, sensing danger creeping like smoke. At breakfast, Victoria made her move. "It's funny," she began casually, slicing fruit with precision. "Does the name Elena Alvarez mean anything to you?" Grace froze, fork halfway to her mouth, color draining from her cheeks. Alexander glanced between them, confusion narrowing his eyes. "She was my mother," Grace admitted at last, voice shaking. The room went silent except for the ticking of a gold clock. Alexander's face hardened, memories of old scandals surfacing. Regret and anger warred behind his controlled expression. The twins looked from adult to adult, baffled and scared. Victoria smiled thinly, savoring the moment. "There you have it, history repeating itself under your nose, brother." Grace's hands tightened in her lap, nails biting her palms. "I'm not my mother," she said, steady but broken. "I only came here because I care about your children." Alexander's jaw clenched, torn between loyalty and doubt. The whispers of the past wrapped around his mind like chains. The scandal that once fractured the Hart name seemed alive again. His silence cut deeper than any accusation. Grace's eyes filled, but she refused to look away. Outside, the garden swayed with wind that felt like warning. Leaves rattled as if repeating Victoria's bitter prophecy. The mansion, alive with warmth days before, chilled once more. Victoria sat tall, satisfied with the fracture she had created. Her eyes glittered with triumph. The truth always comes out. That night, Alexander found Grace kneeling in the garden. Her hands trembled as she dug soil, though no seeds were there. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice sharp with hurt. She looked up, tears shining in moonlight. "Because I wanted to be judged by who I am, not her shadow." Victoria will twist the knife deeper by fabricating evidence, turning suspicion into betrayal, and driving Alexander and Grace further apart. The dawn broke quiet, but Victoria was already awake. Her study smelled of ink and cold ambition. Spread across her desk were stolen photographs of Ethan and Noah. Beside them, toys she had lifted from their room like a thief. Piece by piece, she built a lie strong enough to break bones. "If truth won't bury her, appearances will," she murmured. Her pen scratched paper with forged confessions. Sentences dripped poison. "I've earned their trust. Soon the family will be mine." She blew gently across the ink, her smile sharp as glass. The trap was ready, waiting for Alexander's doubt to snap shut. Meanwhile, Alexander prepared for another day of meetings, but his reflection in the mirror looked nothing like the man he once was. Tired eyes, a heart split between suspicion and longing. He remembered Grace's tenderness with his boys, her courage on the rooftop. Yet Regina's, Victoria's words gnawed at him. Bloodlines never lie. He shook his head, but the unease remained, and unease was the exact soil Victoria's lies needed. While Grace played in the garden with Ethan and Noah, their laughter ringing bright against the marble walls, Victoria slithered upstairs into Grace's room. With practiced precision, she tucked the stolen toys into a drawer. She slid the forged letters under folded clothes. Every detail was perfect, every deceit meticulous. "Let's see how innocent you look now," she whispered. The house itself seemed to shiver under her cruelty. Later that afternoon, Alexander returned unexpectedly. Victoria intercepted him with a folder pressed to her chest. "I wish I were wrong, brother," she sighed, eyes wide with feigned sorrow. She handed over the papers, Grace's supposed handwriting, evidence of betrayal. Alexander read, the blood draining from his face with every line. In the garden, Grace was unaware, laughing as Noah crowned her with flowers. Her joy was pure, sunlight in human form. But when she glanced at the house, Alexander was watching, not with warmth, but with suspicion colder than steel. Her smile faltered, confusion slicing through her calm. That evening the confrontation came like a storm. Alexander entered the living room, the forged letters in hand. "Did you write these?" he demanded, voice rough, eyes wounded. Grace blinked, bewildered, before the accusations landed. "No, I've never written those words. I'd never betray you." He thrust the pages toward her, trembling with rage and doubt. Her tears blurred the ink, yet she stood her ground. "Please, Alexander, someone planted this. You know me." But his silence was heavier than any verdict. Ethan and Noah, peeking from the stairs, clutched each other in fear. Later, in her room, Grace searched frantically. She opened drawers, only to find the toys and photos Victoria had planted. Her knees buckled, despair clawing at her throat. No, this isn't real," she whispered, trembling. But the damning evidence stared back at her like ghosts. Victoria watched from the shadows of the hallway, lips curling. Every sob, every fracture in Grace's heart was music to her. She had turned love into suspicion, trust into poison, and tomorrow the final act would come. The fall of Grace Alvarez was almost complete. Victoria's lies will culminate in Grace's arrest, tearing her from the twins and plunging the mansion back into silence and despair. The storm broke on a grey morning. Police sirens wailed outside the Hart mansion, slicing the calm. Servants gathered in the hall, whispering, eyes wide with dread. Grace, still in her blue uniform, clutched Ethan and Noah's hands. The twins trembled, their voices thin. "Why are they here, Miss Grace?" Two officers stepped inside, their presence sharp, unyielding. "Grace Alvarez," one announced, unfolding a paper. "You're under arrest for fraud, theft, and attempted extortion." The words echoed like thunder across marble floors. Gasps rose. The boys screamed in protest. Grace's face drained of color, disbelief flooding her. "This is a mistake." "I've done nothing." Cold metal cuffs closed around her wrists before she could finish. The sting of steel bit deeper than any wound. Tears streaked down her cheeks, but her gaze stayed steady. Alexander appeared, suit crisp, expression fractured. He stood frozen, a man torn between rage and heartbreak. The forged letters weighed heavy in his pocket. Every instinct screamed she was innocent, yet doubt chained him still. "Alexander," she whispered, "look at me. You know this isn't true." His silence cut sharper than accusation. Grace's knees weakened, her soul cracking under the betrayal. Ethan ran forward, pounding his fists against an officer's leg. "Don't take her! She saved us!" His cry shattered hearts. Noah clung to her side, sobbing, "Please, Dad, stop them." The officers pried the boys away, their screams filling the hall. Grace kissed their foreheads quickly, desperate, unbroken. "Be brave. I'll come back for you." Her voice was steady, though her body trembled. The promise wrapped around them tighter than any chain. Victoria stepped into the scene like a queen surveying conquest. She dabbed a tear that wasn't real, sighing with false sorrow. "Such a shame. I warned you she wasn't who she seemed." Her words slid like poison into Alexander's ears. He flinched but said nothing, guilt drowning his voice. The mansion fell silent once Grace was gone. Her laughter, once warm and alive, vanished like smoke. Ethan and Noah retreated into shadows, clinging to each other. Alexander roamed empty halls, haunted by absence and regret. The house felt heavier, colder, a prison of marble and shame. Days blurred into nights, each darker than the last. The boys stopped eating, their toys untouched. Their drawings, once filled with sunshine and flowers, turned grey. One page showed Grace with chains on her wrists. Another showed tears falling from Alexander's face. At his desk, Alexander buried himself in work, but every file, every contract, blurred under the weight of doubt. He replayed her words, "You know this isn't true," like a broken record. His heart screamed innocence, but his pride clung to suspicion. And in that war, love lay bleeding. From her cell, Grace prayed in silence. She thought of the rooftop, of two small hands gripping hers. She thought of Alexander's eyes before suspicion poisoned them. Her heart ached, but her spirit refused to break. Even behind bars, she whispered, "They need me. I will return." A spark of truth begins to surface. An investigator uncovers cracks in Victoria's deception, and Alexander will be forced to face the reality of his sister's betrayal. Rain pounded the city, drumming against the mansion's glass walls. Inside, silence reigned. Ethan and Noah sat curled together on the couch. Their drawings scattered the floor, each one a cry for their missing Grace. Alexander stood at the window, whiskey untouched in his hand. Every drop of rain felt like accusation against his skin. Downstairs, a stranger arrived. Michael Torres, a private investigator. His coat dripped water, his eyes sharp with certainty. "I have information you need to see," he told Alexander firmly. At first, Alexander waved him off, pride stiff as iron. But something in Michael's tone cracked the wall of denial. They spread documents across the mahogany desk. Receipts, surveillance photos, timestamps that didn't align. The supposed letters from Grace, traced, copied, fabricated. Even the toys found in her drawer bore fingerprints not her own. Victoria's name surfaced like oil on poisoned water. "She orchestrated everything," Michael said, voice steady. "Your sister planted evidence, forged letters, manipulated it all." Alexander's chest tightened, guilt punching through his defenses. The truth he had buried under suspicion now screamed undeniable. And with it came a crushing wave of shame. He remembered Grace's eyes the night of her arrest, the steadiness in her voice when she said, "You know me." Her innocence had been there all along, shining through despair. He had chosen doubt over faith, silence over love. Now the weight of that choice threatened to break him. Victoria entered the study uninvited, elegant as ever. "What's all this?" she asked, feigning ignorance. Michael slid a photo across the desk, Victoria planting toys in Grace's room. Her smile faltered, cracks splintering her mask. Alexander's voice thundered, "You betrayed us." The confrontation shattered years of sibling loyalty. "You think she belongs here?" Victoria spat, eyes blazing. "She's a maid's daughter, Alexander. She will destroy everything." His fist slammed the desk, rattling frames and glasses. "She already saved everything, something you never could." For the first time, Victoria's composure slipped. Her eyes glistened, anger colliding with fear. "You'd throw away blood for her?" she hissed. Alexander's jaw tightened, his voice like steel. "I'd throw away lies for truth, and you are the lie." Upstairs, the twins pressed their ears to the floor, listening. They didn't understand every word, but they felt the shift. For the first time since Grace's arrest, hope flickered in their hearts. Noah whispered to Ethan, "Dad believes her now." And in that whisper, the house began to breathe again. That night, Alexander visited Grace in her cell. She looked up, surprise and hurt flashing in her eyes. "I know the truth now," he said, voice raw. "I failed you, but I will make this right." Grace's tears fell, not of despair but of fragile relief. Victoria's empire of lies will collapse, her mask breaking, her crimes exposed, leading to a painful moment of confession, forgiveness, and justice. The courtroom was hushed, a theater of judgment and shame. Victoria Hart stood at the center, designer dress flawless, spirit unraveling. The prosecutor laid out the evidence piece by piece, photos, forgeries, fingerprints. Each revelation struck like a hammer, breaking her polished facade. Ethan and Noah sat with Alexander, their small hands clutching his. Grace entered quietly, freed from her cell, but not yet from the pain. Her uniform was gone, replaced with a simple dress that held dignity. Every eye turned toward her, some pitying, some ashamed. Alexander rose to meet her, guilt heavy in his gaze. "I should have believed you," he whispered. "I failed you." Grace searched his face, finding sincerity in his brokenness. "You believed what your pain allowed," she replied softly. Her voice was not sharp with blame, but heavy with truth. "I carried your silence like chains, but I never stopped caring." Her words cracked something deep in Alexander's chest. Victoria's lawyer begged for leniency, but the walls had closed in. Finally, Victoria dropped the mask, shoulders trembling with defeat. "I hated her because she reminded me of everything I lost," she confessed. Her voice shook, her pride bleeding out in front of all. "I thought destroying her would protect us, but I only destroyed myself." The judge's gavel struck, sealing her fate with iron certainty. Yet the room was quieter than triumph. It carried sorrow. Grace stepped forward, eyes shining with compassion unexpected. "I forgive you, Victoria," she said, voice trembling but firm. Gasps filled the room. Mercy was rarer than justice. Victoria's eyes widened, tears streaking the mask she once wore. "Why?" she choked, collapsing to her knees. Grace knelt too, hands hovering, not quite touching. "Because hate would make me like you," she whispered, "and love is the only way to heal what's broken." The officers led Victoria away, her sobs echoing down marble halls. Ethan and Noah buried themselves in Grace's arms, refusing to let go. "Don't ever leave again," they cried, voices breaking with relief. Grace kissed their hair, her tears falling into their curls. "No one will ever take me from you again." Outside, cameras flashed, questions flew like arrows. Alexander shielded Grace with his body, firm and unyielding. "She is not just my son's savior," he declared. "She is the heart this family almost lost." For once, his words came not as a CEO, but as a man. That evening, the mansion glowed with a light it hadn't known in years. The boys ran through the halls, laughter pure and unstoppable. Grace stood in the living room, her gaze lifting to the ceiling. The silence that had once suffocated now felt like peace. Alexander approached, holding her hand as though it was sacred. "Can you forgive me too?" he asked, voice quiet. Grace looked into his eyes, seeing regret but also hope. "I already did," she said, her smile trembling. Their fingers intertwined, a bond reforged in fire. The mansion exhaled, alive again. With wounds healed and forgiveness granted, love will blossom fully, culminating in a quiet, intimate wedding where family is reborn. Spring arrived like a hymn, soft breezes carrying the scent of new life. The Hart Mansion's rooftop, once a place of fear, was transformed with flowers. White drapes fluttered against the skyline, catching sunlight like sails. A small arch stood at the center, simple yet radiant. This was not a spectacle for society. It was a promise for family. Alexander straightened his tie nervously, for once unmasked by power. He looked nothing like the CEO commanding boardrooms. Today, he was only a man about to speak vows from the heart. His sons tugged at his jacket, holding small velvet boxes. "Dad, don't forget the rings," Ethan whispered seriously. Grace appeared at the doorway, her dress modest but glowing. The breeze caught her hair, haloing her in light. Every step she took erased shadows that had haunted the mansion. Noah gasped loudly, clapping his hands. "She looks like an angel." Grace laughed softly, though her eyes shimmered with tears. The guests were few, only those who had stood by them. Mrs. Lopez, the agency manager, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Father Michael adjusted his stole, smiling knowingly. The twins stood proudly as ring-bearers, their faces glowing. This was not a wedding of wealth, it was one of redemption. Grace reached the arch, her hands trembling as Alexander took them. The city stretched behind them, vast and glittering like a witness. "I once thought love had ended with loss," Alexander began, "but you showed me love is not replaced, it grows." His voice cracked, but he didn't look away. Grace's reply came like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I came here only to protect your children. I never imagined this." She glanced at Ethan and Noah, their eyes wide with joy. "They taught me that family is chosen by love, not blood." Her words left no heart untouched. The vows were exchanged in whispers, intimate and eternal. The twins carried the rings with solemn pride, slipping them into place. Grace's hands trembled as Alexander slid the band onto her finger. When it was her turn, she looked into his eyes, steady at last. "With this I choose you, and the life we will build together. By the power vested in me," Father Michael declared, "I pronounce you husband and wife." The rooftop erupted in applause, Ethan and Noah cheering the loudest. Alexander pulled Grace close, sealing the moment with a kiss. The city roared beneath them, but their world was silent and whole. Afterward, they sat at a small table adorned with wildflowers. The boys devoured cake, smearing frosting across their cheeks. Grace laughed, wiping crumbs from Ethan's chin. Alexander leaned back, watching the scene with awe. "This is what I was missing," he murmured to himself. As dusk fell, lanterns glowed like stars around the rooftop. The family stood together, arms intertwined, gazing at the horizon. No wealth, no scandal, no shadow could tarnish this moment. The mansion, once a tomb of sorrow, now sang with life. Love had rebuilt what lies had nearly destroyed. Their story closes with a new beginning, Grace expecting a child, the family complete, and hope glowing brighter than the city lights. The Hart mansion woke with softer light now, as if the sun itself had changed. Laughter echoed down its marble halls, spilling from every corner. Ethan and Noah raced each other across the garden, voices bright. Grace sat on a bench, her hand resting gently on her belly, a secret no longer hidden, but celebrated. New life was on the way. Alexander walked toward her, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. He looked less like a CEO and more like a father, a husband. He knelt before her, pressing a kiss against her hand. "Another heartbeat in our family," he whispered with awe. Grace's eyes glistened, joy overflowing where sorrow once lived. The twins skidded to a stop at her knees, panting with excitement. "Is it true?" Noah asked breathlessly. "Will we really have a baby brother?" Ethan added, eyes wide. Grace smiled, brushing their hair with tender fingers. "Yes, you'll be big brothers now, protectors, teachers, friends." The boys shouted with delight, running circles around the bench. Alexander laughed for the first time in years, freely, without restraint. It was not the polished smile of a public man. It was raw, unguarded happiness that belonged only to them. Grace leaned into him, the warmth of family wrapping tight. That evening, the rooftop transformed again, not for danger, nor vows. This time it was for stargazing, blankets spread under the sky. The city lights flickered below, but the stars shone brighter above. Ethan pointed eagerly. "That one's ours. It means family forever." Noah nodded, whispering, "And Grace is the brightest star of all." Alexander pulled them closer, his arm protective, steady. Grace rested against him. the twins nestled in her embrace. The hum of the city faded, replaced by the music of belonging. Every scar, every betrayal, every doubt had led them here, not to perfection, but to love stronger than any storm. Inside the nursery, plans were already taking shape. Small shoes waited by the crib, gifts chosen with care. The walls, once bare, were painted in soft blues and gold. The boys argued cheerfully over names, their voices drifting down halls. Hope hung in the air like perfume, impossible to ignore. Grace often paused in those moments, her heart swelling. She remembered the rooftop where it all began, the edge of tragedy, how close they had come to losing everything, and how miracles are sometimes disguised as ordinary courage. She whispered a silent prayer of gratitude into the night. Alexander joined her by the nursery window, sliding an arm around her. "Do you realize," he murmured, "we've been given a second chance?" Grace leaned her head against his shoulder, tears shining. "Yes, and this time we won't waste it." Their silhouettes stood framed against starlight, unshakable and whole. The mansion exhaled, no longer a cage of marble, but a home of love. Its walls carried new sounds, laughter, lullabies, promises kept. Its halls bore witness to redemption and renewal. The twins, once frightened and lonely, now thrived in light. And Grace, once unseen, became the heart of it all. The story closed not with an ending, but with a door opening wide. A new child, a new chapter, a new legacy of hope. The city below blinked on, unaware of the miracle above, but those who watched knew. Love had conquered lies, fear, and pride, and in that triumph, a family was born again. If you believe love can heal even the deepest wounds, tell me in the comments what this story meant to you, and don't forget to subscribe. More stories of hope and redemption are waiting for you.